I've been telling a few people that it's kind of hard to believe that it's been 10 years since I moved away from the state of Minnesota. And whenever anybody asks me what I think of Washington, D.C., I always tell them the same thing. It's too hot, there's too many people, but other than that, I love it. But I try to get back to Minnesota as often as I can, and one of the things that I like to do when I come back to Minnesota is get together with my family. And during these get-togethers, one of the things that you inevitably talk about is what you do for your job. And now, most of you have jobs that are pretty easy to explain. So my dad is a farmer. Everybody knows what a farmer is. My high school classmate, Andy Bowensock, is a dentist. Everybody knows what a dentist does. But I am an agricultural statistician for the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service, or USDA NAS for short. So that makes things a little bit more complicated. So we're sitting around the dinner table with my family, and one of my aunts finally just comes right out and asks me, so Tony, what is the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service? Well, this is the same question that I was asking myself nearly 11 years ago at an internship fair at the University of Minnesota. I walked up to the USDA NAS booth and I saw that they were offering an internship for a junior math or statistics major, preferably with a background in agriculture. I about fell over. The junior check, the math major check. I grew up on a corn and soybean farm just outside of here in Minnesota. This job was perfect for me, and I couldn't think that this could apply to anybody else. So I went back to my room and I Googled the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service. I found out that NAS is the statistical arm of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They put out nearly 500 reports every year on all aspects of American agriculture. Turns out that the demand for agricultural statistics goes way back in our nation's history. In 1791, George Washington received a letter from an Englishman named Arthur Young. Now, Mr. Young was asking some questions on agriculture in the United States, and he wanted to know some items such as land values, crop types and yields, livestock inventory, and taxes. George Washington, an accomplished farmer in his own right, sent a bunch of letters to some landowners in the United States. He compiled all of the data on his own, and then sent a few letters back to Mr. Young. So in that respect, George Washington is considered to have conducted the first agricultural survey in the United States. However, official agricultural statistics did not start until 1840, when the Commissioner of Patents conducted the first agricultural census in the United States. In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln founded the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They quickly realized that in order to feed the Union troops in the Civil War, that they had to have a better handle on how much food was being grown in the United States. So in July of 1863, the United States put out the first monthly crop production report, a practice which continues to this day. Agricultural statistics have continued to be compiled and put together in the United States. Currently, USDA NAS has 2 headquarters units, one in Washington, D.C., and another in St. Louis, Missouri. There's also 12 regional field offices across the United States. And these regional field offices are in charge of putting together all of the surveys that are done to America's farmers and ranchers and setting the estimates at the state level. We also maintain public relations staff and enumerator crews in all 50 states. USDA NAS puts out reports on all aspects of American agriculture, including forecast and production estimates of food and fiber, prices paid and received by farmers, farm labor and wages, farm income and expenses, chemical use, and demographic data. So I had gotten my answer for my Google search for the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service. And I applied for the internship, and I received the job that summer in the Minnesota field office in St. Paul, Minnesota. And soon after, I received a full-time job in the South Dakota field office in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. About 4 years later, I was transferred into headquarters in Washington, D.C., where I'm working today. So my family thought all of this information was pretty interesting. But it was now time for my grandma to ask me a question. She asked me, so Tony, what do you actually do for the USDA Statistics Service? Well, it depends upon what kind of mood I'm in when I answer that question. If I'm trying to be funny, I just reply, I'm a government bean counter. Now, this doesn't always get the laughs, it usually just gets a lot of confused looks. So then I have to explain that I'm the National Soybean Commodity Statistician. And I put together all the official USDA statistics on soybean acreage, yield, production, prices, and stocks. Like I say, if you ever hear on the radio that there are 88 million acres of soybeans planted in the United States, I was the guy who came up with that.
You didn't actually plant them all, though.
So this whole process starts back in the state regional field offices that I discussed earlier. Every year we send hundreds of thousands of surveys to America's farmers and ranchers, asking them questions about acreage, yield, and production that they are planting across the United States. All of these numbers are compiled in our regional field offices, and they set the numbers at the state level and send them into headquarters. After a thorough round of analysis, myself and several other members of the Agricultural Statistics Board set the national numbers and release those numbers out to the public. For some of our more market-sensitive reports, some of these reports are actually put together in what we call a lockup situation. When we are putting out a lockup report, before we receive all of the state estimates, we lock the doors, we seal all of the windows shut, and we cut off all telecommunications to the outside world. We come in as early as midnight the night before. We work through the night and through the morning to set the estimates and compile the report. And no one is allowed to leave until the report is released at noon Eastern time the next day. This is done to make sure that no one receives the information early and that no one has an unfair advantage with the data that is included in our reports. USDA mass covers all kinds of information dealing with agricultural statistics, and I have served in a couple other capacities while I've been working in headquarters. For a couple of years, I worked on our survey standardization teams, where I led projects to make sure that many of our major survey programs were being conducted consistently across all of our regional field offices. I have also worked in the survey administration branch, which is in charge of coordinating all of our data collection efforts on a national level. But most of the time when people ask me what I do, I just tell them that I'm a government bean counter. So it's at this point in the conversation that the light bulb comes on for one of my uncles. They're like, so you're the guy that calls me up and asks me all these questions about my farm at night? Yep, that's us. So do I really need to fill out these surveys? Why are USDA National Agricultural Statistics reports so important? Short answer, yes, you really should fill out these surveys. And yes, our reports are really important. Every year we send a lot of surveys out to America's farmers and ranchers. We would not be able to put out the reports that we do if it wasn't for the cooperation that we receive from these farmers. Markets require information in order to be efficient. All aspects of the agricultural sector, from production to processing to marketing, require information, timely and reliable agricultural statistics in order to make the best decisions possible. Investors in agriculture are confident in buying commodities from American farmers because they know they are going to get good information from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. When there are surprises in the market, this creates risks. And one of the ways to alleviate that risk is the data that we put out. Agricultural statistics are also used to implement and operate our nation's farm programs. Every year, the United States government spends $20 billion in support of commodity programs, conservation programs, and crop insurance programs. Agricultural statistics ensure that this money is distributed fairly, and it provides a statistical benchmark to be able to tell if our nation's farm programs are successful in providing a reliable and safe food supply for the American people and our customers across the world. Agricultural statistics are also used in support of many federal, state, and local programs supporting consumer protection, conservation, trade, education, and research. Agricultural statistics are also heavily used by the transportation sector, the warehousing and storage industries, banks and other lending institutions, commodity traders, and other providers of agricultural inputs. Train companies and the trucking industry use agricultural statistics so that they are able to position trucks and rail cars so that they are more efficiently able to transport the harvested crop of America's farmers and ranchers. Agricultural processing facilities like ethanol plants, slaughterhouses, and flour mills use agricultural statistics to decide where they are going to build new facilities that can be better used to serve American farmers. And producers and people who sell agricultural inputs, like implement dealers, banks, and feed stores, use agricultural statistics so they can better position their services so that their businesses can be more successful and that they can better serve America's farmers and ranchers. So today, my aunt has learned a little bit about the history and the purpose of the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service. My grandma has learned a little bit about what I do for the agency, and my uncle has learned about the importance of agricultural statistics. Does anybody else around the dinner table have any questions?
So you rely on the farmers themselves to determine their surveys and stuff. Do you also use the local ag office? It seems to me they'd have maybe more accurate.
Absolutely. It's we do go to our local farm service agencies. In some states more than others, many farmers are required to enlist their acreages. We do use that as check data, but unfortunately the problem with that is they don't always get the data as early as we need it in order to put out our reports. So we definitely use FSA acreage in some of our end of the year reports, but in some of our earlier forecasts, sometimes that data isn't nearly useful. So we're definitely using as many data sources as we can. And something else that we're also getting more into is using satellite imagery, where we can actually be able to use satellite images to figure out exactly what crops are being grown on the ground. But unfortunately, still not everything is quite as consistent as getting the data directly from the farmers themselves. And we're going to continue to rely upon America's farmers and ranchers to put out these agricultural statistics.
So do you ever find out, or have you ever found out that, whoa, we're way off here? What happened?
It's
First question, what did you do about it?
Well, we put out several reports a year. For example, it's just talking about this year's crop now. We put out a prospective plantings report in March where we were actually doing this based upon farmers' intentions and what they said they were going to grow. The big report we're working on now is the June acreage report, which is coming out on June 30th. And then we're going to have 3 or 4 forecasts of the soybean crop before the end of the year, and then we're going to put out our final estimates in January. So we have quite a few cracks at this number, I guess. I mean, sometimes our data gets better as the year goes along, and but we're pretty confident in the processes we use, and so we have a lot of check data from the industry also. So if the industry wasn't confident in our numbers, they wouldn't be using them. But definitely, the market looks at our numbers and is generally pretty trustworthy about what we do.
You didn't really answer your question. Did you ever screw up?
He's been out in Washington.
Say, Tony, I don't have any personal experience with this, but I I have knowledge that sometimes producers aren't always honest as they fill out those surveys. So is there a fudge factor that you use in your calculations to guard for that, or how do you deal with that?
Well, it's, yes, and it's that, there are certainly people who say, oh, the farmers are never telling the truth. From what I've seen, and I've gone out and I've done many interviews with farmers, I believe that generally, farmers are generally pretty truthful when they're turning out their surveys. And you can always tell me, it's like, are they lying high or are they lying low? It's, the numbers that we put out match up with some of the check data that we talk about. It's just using soybeans as an example. A vast amount of the soybeans that are produced in the United States are crushed for oil. So we have very accurate data in terms of how much oil has been crushed, how many soybeans have been crushed for oil in the United States. And our production numbers match up with the crushing numbers, so we know that our numbers are pretty accurate. So we've had a long history of using this survey data, and we're confident that it's accurate to be able to put out agricultural estimates.
Do they have the option of returning the survey, or are they just expected, it's required that they provide this information?
It's virtually all of the surveys that we do are voluntary, so it's we do our agricultural census, which I talked a little bit earlier, which is done every 5 years, is actually mandatory, but all of the surveys that I talked about that we're doing for our annual production reports are voluntary. So we are pretty happy with the support that we get for our voluntary surveys, but our numbers could always be better if we could always feel comfortable. Yes.
So like when you go in the locked room for those many hours,
Yep.
I was thinking of the movie Trading Places. Is that kind, I mean, yeah, your numbers can't get out there
And,
before,
yeah, for those of you who are familiar with the movie Trading Places, it's one of the references that they make in Trading Places is they're talking about the USDA citrus report. And that is the reports that my agency works on. And in the movie, the main characters get access to the citrus report numbers before everybody else does, and they do that to their advantage near the end of the movie. It's a very funny movie. I would definitely recommend it. But I can assure you that we have many security measures in place to ensure that doesn't happen. We put a lot of effort into making sure that nobody gets this data early, and that we do a good job of making sure that everybody gets the data.
How often do you have to do this locked room thing?
It's, we put out a monthly report. It's, for soybeans, our forecasts, they're gonna start in August, and then we're gonna put those out monthly till November. So it's, I have to come in and work through the night. It's for 4 months out of the year for soybeans. Yeah.
So are you a diehard Redskins fan yet, like everybody else
I am not a diehard Redskins fan. I've been able to maintain my purple and gold allegiance. It's where people get mad at me is that I do live about a mile away from the Washington Nationals baseball park, and I attend quite a few Nationals games. So it's I've been probably following the Nationals more than I've been following the Twins lately. But I still try and follow the Twins as much as I can.
It's not appropriate to say
It has absolutely nothing to do with your profession, but what are your top 5 favorite foods in the Minnesota State Fair?
One is number one is definitely not hard to think about, and that's cheese curds. You would be shocked that, and because I'm a huge state fair and county fair nut, and I've been trying to go to county fairs on the East Coast, and there's no cheese curds anywhere. It's crazy. It's been kind of a craze that poutine, are people familiar with poutine? That more and more restaurants are serving poutine. That's kind of the craze that's been starting. And there's been a few bars that'll serve cheese curds, but it's like you can't go to a county fair and get cheese curds, and that's just something that just blows my mind. I'm a big fan of mini donuts. I'm a big fan of it's hard to beat a lot of the ice cream combinations we have at the state fair. I like trying out a lot of the new foods that the Minnesota State Fair is. When I come back from the Minnesota State Fair every year, I've been blogging about them on my Facebook and Twitter page. So if you ever want to check out the TKD Fair Foods I definitely, I don't know if I'm up to 5 yet, but I think I'm talking about a lot.
So, I believe in the final issue of the DC Current in the spring of 2002, hopes for the future and plans for the future, there was something to the tune of Dahlman for President 2020 or 24, I don't know what year, but so is the USDA head statsman, is that typically a stepping stone to POTUS, or where?
This is my last presidential election now where I am not constitutionally eligible to be president of the United States. So 2020, I can legally run now. So it's and I was talking about this earlier. It's Washington D.C. It's probably not the best place to do my political jumping off at this point. So we're going to have to convince me to come back to Minnesota. So we're still working on how we're actually going to be able to get that done. So I'm not confirming or denying.
Sounds qualified.
I just have one quick thing. I was very disappointed, Tony, that you didn't reference the statistician Jason B. Olson. During this presentation, I remember in speech, you used to like to use him as an expert.
Yeah, well, it was back in the extent speaking days. It's like if you couldn't find a source for something, you'd just come up with names.
Jason had been an extent speaker and had graduated, and Tony wasn't the only one who had done it until finally they got a judge who remembered Jason. Well, no, Jason competed for your team like 6 years ago. I don't think that's what you know about.
Any other questions?
Well, I'd like to thank you for getting me out of the too much heat and too many people have watched DC, and I hope you learned a little bit about the exciting world of agriculture.